OSCC, it's Jade here. We got something a little funny today. A little goofy, you could say. My first actual multi-degree commentary. We're gonna get right down to brass tacks and explain this whole degree chain now because I'm really bad at intros. Today we're covering Blazing Larvesta, a commentator I have pretty much no opinion on because I kind of forgot they existed until recently. I don't intend that in a mean way either. I haven't been here in years, so forgive me. He did a retrospective commentary on YouTube Dude 2, specifically one of his more popular commentaries. From what I remember, his most popular one actually. Contentious decision right off the bat. Anyway, YouTube Dude's video was about Nihilistic Snake. Snake was covering That Kid Douglas. Douglas was covering Kablam Bandicoot 64, and Kablam was covering Phantom Strider. The root of this being a top 10 worst American cartoons video. God bless. Now, I'm gonna put a little extra disclaimer here. I have nothing against retrospective commentaries, and it is not the reason why I'm covering this video. I plan on doing a retrospective commentary myself in the future. I'm making that clear right now just in case. I do think, however, that retrospective commentaries are a difficult thing to do. This is why. Let's get started.
This video goes over some sensitive and potentially triggering topics. If you are not comfortable with these, I suggest not watching this video.
Stop. Okay, I'm gonna be that guy and say that I do actually have a problem with these disclaimers. Not only for the reason you're thinking though, nah. I'm gonna be the commentator of accessibility for a second. This font sucks for readability, and it's going to especially suck for anyone who is dyslexic. I'm not forcing you to change your font or saying that everyone is required to use dyslexia-friendly fonts. I'm just saying that it goes a long way and would be very much appreciated. Regardless of the font though, the formatting is bad, the text is small for the first one, the backgrounds are noisy for both, the color choice for the trigger warning is straining to the eyes, and the outlines are barely there. This is coming from someone who does genuinely have issues reading text, which is why modus-based fonts are always my favorite ones, and also why I went off on this tangent in the first place. And for one last nail in the coffin, this is lesser, but I don't know where this "my disclaimer needs to be as long-winded as possible" trend came from, but I'm kind of bored of it. You are free to take it or leave it, but disclaimers don't need to fit every possible outcome and don't need to be this long. You can fit the same information while cutting down the sentences. Here's an example I cooked up myself. See also my own disclaimer. Maybe it's just me, but the "you'll be in big trouble, mister" and the random preemptive apology at the end is just unnecessary.
The Pyro's a soup can!
This is Nihilistic Snake, the user we are covering today. You may be wondering who this guy is and what exactly we are covering from him. Well, for starters, he's a commentator. He's not a commentator looked fondly upon, but he's a commentator. If you want to delve deeper, he used to be known as Slothboy494. However, in May of last year, he decided to change his username because he wanted to start anew, considering he was getting lots of backlash at the time, and made his first commentary under the new username on a guy named Roosh V, some chuckle nut who advocated for legalizing rape. And I thought that his commentary was possibly the worst commentary ever made. How he fucked up a commentary on someone unintentionally supporting rape, I'll never know. But you can sure check out me trying to understand what went wrong on the YouTube Dude 101 archive channel.
Snake didn't like my video because I called him an SJW and parroted a lot of points from a podcast that covered him. I thought that reasoning was stupid because he was discrediting me for one tiny potshot, and I did bring in new points, such as using not only one, but all of his sources against him, something no other commentator who covered his video did.
I would have given you the benefit of the doubt if you didn't continue on by saying that rape culture is not an epidemic for men, when, judging by those statistics and possibilities and how generalizing you're being right now to the entire gender of male for this crime, one can argue otherwise. All three of your sources. All three of them, and they went against your argument. That's a fucking record.
YouTube Dude, if you want your target to listen to you, I don't think calling them a social justice warrior will give the impression of someone wanting to help. If I were the one you were labeling an SJW, I wouldn't be inclined to hear what you have to say either, regardless of if you're right or wrong. Also, the clip you're using from your first commentary on Snake does a wimpy job at proving your point, since we don't actually see the sources you use against Snake in their video. Also, no examples of other people who covered them aside from you? We got was that a podcast that did Snake's video before you did, and that's why Snake didn't listen to your first commentary on them. Like, maybe you show your sources better in your description, but no one can verify it now considering your channel was wiped clean out of nowhere a few years back. Worst thing is I can't even blame you for that last part, so shame on you, YouTube!
Whoa boy, that was a lot. Larvesta, you do realize you're saying the exact thing that YouTube Dude just said was stupid, right? You're discrediting what he has to say on the basis of a potshot, which is not a valid reason to not hear out someone on their criticisms. Oh, and I didn't miss the regardless of if you're right or wrong part. Wow, it's almost like that is exactly what he was getting at. I'm not impressed by your call for evidence either. The point of showing the clip was additional context of what he was talking about. You are on an entirely different discussion right now, especially since YouTube Dude was just explaining why Snake was not a very liked commentator and his history with them.
And from there, it's just been one big rivalry. Snake didn't take my criticism, so he kept making shitty videos with the occasional one that's tolerable. I started yelling at him over how awful his videos were, and he ranted about me on Twitter as a response. I then trolled him on Twitter by retweeting a couple of posts that made him look stupid, and it only took him 6 months to block me. He started raving on about how I'm obsessed with him, how another commentary I was going to make on him would most likely suck, and how happy he was that I was venting about shit that was happening to me IRL. I also started ranting on how he wanted people to give moments to him rather than him earning them, how he was a horrible piece of shit that runs on ad hominem, and how he wouldn't listen to criticism from people he disliked, and never took criticism whenever he did listen. Now, whether he was right and I was wrong, or he was wrong and I was right, is something I'll let you decide for yourself.
Honestly, looking back, both of you were in the wrong. Snake refusing to accept criticism and making ill-faith tweets was bad, yes. However, you provoking them, such as by retweeting Snake's bad tweets and continuing to speak of them after being blocked, doesn't make you look much better. That's not even touching on the lack of any of your own tweets being shown, making you look even more suspicious.
I'll give you one thing, Larvesta. Pointing out how YouTube Dude didn't show his own tweets was the one actually good point in this interjection. You still lack self-awareness though. So you say outright that Snake not taking criticism is bad, right after the interjection where you say it wasn't bad because they were called an SJW. Yeah, no, this is contradictory. It's not specifically the same context, as in just generally not taking criticism versus ignoring it because of a potshot, but it's pretty much the same concept. Additionally, they are not equally in the wrong because they both didn't handle their dislike of each other perfectly. Just because two people made mistakes doesn't mean that they are on the same level inherently. Larvesta, I know you can read because you displayed it in your trigger warning, Snake said a fucking slur. That automatically makes them worse in the situation. There's also no proof on either side that YouTube Dude kept directly provoking Snake after he was blocked. Subtweeting and ranting about a person doesn't count because it's not direct provocation or trolling. Please tell me this only happens once. Fuck.
Glad to see you still have a shitty intro that drags on for way too long and has clips that are lazily put together, considering some match up with the music and some don't. At least you're not using Movie Maker anymore. That's not saying much. Actually, that makes it worse. Now you have no excuse for this shit.
22 seconds. How is that dragged out? Furthermore, how are the clips lazily put together? Arbitrarily not matching up to the music is not especially noticeable without someone pointing it out like you did.
Are we, like, watching the same video? Am I in the wrong timeline? The clips not syncing up to the music is what makes it lazily put together. Also, your use of arbitrarily is completely out of place grammatically, so I don't really know what you're referring to. If you're saying that it not matching up to the music is an arbitrary complaint, then no. The clips being lazily edited is what makes the intro feel dragged out. This is another thing you should very well be aware of because your own intro is 37 seconds, longer than Snake's, and doesn't drag out because it's edited in sync with the music. The last portion of this interjection is particularly hilarious. Not especially noticeable without someone pointing it out. Yeah, congratulations. Someone pointed it out, and now it's noticeable. Please come back to me when you have actual substance, thank you. Is that fucking Loter God?
Mods, crush his skull, thank you.
Yeah, this incoherent montage intro is giving me several forms of blood cancer. Please change it to something that won't drive me to suicide, okay? Okay.
How is this intro incoherent? Would you mind explaining yourself like how I did with your intro? Or is explaining yourself just too hard for you?
Hey, I did not consent to being seathered, excuse me.
Honestly, YouTube Dude, consider yourself lucky you don't have an intro of your own for me to continue this intro roastingception. Your point isn't even invalid given how vague Snake was with their critique, but given your own attempt, you're not as better as you think.
Awesome, so this is just a no you that isn't even valid because YouTube Dude did explain why it was a lazy intro. So anyway...
That said, if none of you mind, I'd like to take a shot at critiquing Douglas's intro myself.
Hey, actually, I do mind. Go ahead though, I'm really curious.
While it's only somewhat longer than Snake's at 29 seconds, it nonetheless manages to feel a lot more dragged out. The montage feels very random compared to Snake's Tomb Raider clips, showing a bunch of media clips of people without any sort of apparent connection, and the way the text is constantly moving around the screen is also incredibly distracting and awkward to watch.
Swing and a miss. So, Snake and Larvesta are both wrong here because it's not just a montage of random media clips. The intro is supposed to show Douglas reacting to things in various ways. What makes this worse is that this shows you do know how intros can feel dragged out without actually being that long, your own explanation being lackluster as well. I can't tell if you're saying that because the clips are random and makes it feel dragged out, along with it lacking any connection with Douglas, or if those are two separate exclusive points. The text, which, by the way, you literally had a point laid out for you on a silver platter, is not constantly moving around the screen. Maybe this is more semantic than anything, but these are very slow movie maker transitions that give you the time to read, which is the point. You're supposed to read it. The point you could have had is that the text colors are low contrast and therefore hard to read in the first place. That and the whole intro looking very amateur, the premise of the clips not being clear, and the music not syncing with anything are the only critiques I'd bring up because, they're actually things that can be explained and improved upon.
Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Young Hero Rants. Today we're going to cover Weston Sharpstein, aka Kablam Bandicoot 64. Now yes, I know his last name is technically pronounced Sharpenstein, but I intentionally mispronounced it because, let's be honest, somebody getting Kablam's last name wrong should be the least of his worries.
Wait, so you're mispronouncing his last name intentionally so you can annoy him, yet continue to say that it's something not worth caring about? Yeah, question. Why did you even do it?
Oh my god, are you dense? That kid Douglas did that to make a potshot because the last time he did a video on KB, Douglas got scoffed at by Kablam for that exact reason. Even without this context, it's obvious that's what Douglas was going for because he said it should be the least of Kablam's worries, implying Kablam actually cares. You can analyze statements, right?
YouTube dude, if you have to resort to an obscure comment to get a point across, something tells me you're stretching to make a point. If Douglas wanted to get across that was the reason for his potshot, he should have included the comments in his original video for context. Even disregarding the context, while Douglas does imply that Kablam cares about petty potshots, it still comes off as an incredibly random thing to get on Kablam's case for.
In what world is this stretching? Seriously, am I in the wrong timeline? Cause I could be. We all know how fucked commentary pocket dimensions can get. Potshots don't need context, it's just an offhanded mention that is mostly there for a segue, in Douglas's case. You even admit that even without context it can be understood, and since Kablam does care in the first place, then this potshot wouldn't be random. This whole interjection falls apart like a Jenga tower from the word go.
I'm not trying to be mean when I say this. I'm not trying to go out of my way to insult him as I say this. But his channel is the most unoriginal, clickbaity, and varietyless channel in the cartoon community on YouTube. I want you to take note of who is saying this. This is coming from the same guy that was and still is notorious for making videos on Mr. Enter. Now, to be fair, he hasn't made a new video on Mr. Enter in a few months and he's tried to somewhat diversify his topics. He will forever be stuck with that label, not only because he was totally overly obsessive with his hatred of Mr. Enter, but also because his videos on Mr. Enter weren't particularly good to begin with.
Okay, let's go for your 2 reasons on why Kablam will forever be remembered as Enter Hater number 25,762.
His videos were bad.
I can debunk this with experience. For those who don't know, about a year ago I made a pretty awful commentary on Comic Jack. It was awful, and I did get put under blast for it. So you know what I did? I improved from it, and because I did, the most that shortcoming amounts to nowadays is a fucking meme rather than a label. People more remember me for my 10th commentary on Nero's Q, my Savdross commentary, and my last commentary on Snake. Fuck. The proof can be found in Doodle's co-op when nobody mentioned my Comic Jack commentary, and instead were giving legit thoughts towards my content or the co-op itself, a majority of which were positive, and of which were negative did not mention my Comic Jack commentary at all. You flat out say that Kablam is trying to improve by diversifying his topics and not mentioning Enter anymore, so who's to say that the same won't happen to him?
He was overly obsessive with him.
Hey, another point I can debunk with experience. You know who is also overly obsessive with Enter to the point where he mentioned him in nearly every commentary he made? Me! And that's not even much of a meme towards me anymore. Plus, it's not a label either, considering I definitely didn't see any comments about that on my co-op with Doodle. Yet.
Except you and Kablam's situations weren't one and the same, given that you were considered to have improved your content while Kablam wasn't, considering your final thoughts in this video. And while it probably doesn't mean much, in retrospect, Kablam has mostly faded from memory ever since leaving commentaries, but he does still get people memeing on him from time to time over his obsession with Mr. Enter.
Thanks, Larvesta. It almost felt like, for a fleeting moment, I was actually watching a good video. Jokes aside, this is a lot of nothing coming right after that much source video. And to be fair, in this case it would be really hard to shorten because much of the context is needed. You could have sped up YouTube Dude's video in tandem with the others though. I'm gonna be real here, this whole chain loses the plot. Douglas, when you really think about his original tangent, is pretty much saying that Kablam is a hypocrite for calling Phantom Strider unoriginal and varietyless because Kablam did a lot of videos on Mr. Enter, which you can assume he sees as unoriginal and varietyless. I don't blame any of you guys, because Douglas goes off the rails entirely due to his wording, but it's just really funny to me that no one took the opportunity to point this out. Anyways, back to Larvesta's actual point. Just because the situations aren't exactly one-to-one doesn't make what UTD is saying invalid. Douglas is saying that Kablam will forever be stuck with this label. YouTube Dude is saying that from experience, there is a chance that he won't be stuck with this label. His final thoughts don't do anything to contradict that either, because regardless of him, at the time of this video, not taking criticism, there was still a chance for him to change that.
Humor on network. This will allow me now to summon 4 of my boss monsters. Good game.
Hey, genuine question, why are the timestamps separated like this? Is it just because they're separate interjections? But there's also a whole 13 seconds that aren't included for some reason? What are those 13 seconds, Larvesta? What is happening? Why? Just why?
Help me!
And while America definitely has a good portion of the best cartoons of all time, they also have a good portion of the worst cartoons of all time. So,
well, maybe that's because America is a huge country, both geographically and population-wise. So of course you're going to get a little bit of good and a little bit of bad. I don't think it's worth pointing that out because most of us already know that.
Well, no shit, Sherlock. If you suppose that everybody already knows how large the United States is, and thus has its fair share of good and bad cartoons, why the hell did you have to spend the last few minutes pointing out the size and geography of it all? People already know the United States is large, and thus, its rate of good cartoons and bad cartoons is a lot higher. Everybody already knows that. You didn't really need to point out that the United States is large.
Am I imagining this right now? Okay, so Douglas gets onto Kablam's case for pointing out obvious information, when Kablam was getting onto Strider's case for pointing out obvious information. Kablam misses the point that Strider was doing this as a segue while he himself said something obvious as a segue. And Douglas misses the point that Kablam was doing that as a segue while he himself said something obvious as a segue. Did Douglas just make the exact same point Kablam made with the exact same problem in his argument and put it towards Kablam? Can this get any worse?
He was merely explaining how America's size contributes to its large output of good and bad cartoons. Yes, the geography is arbitrary, but the population isn't. There are animators, writers, and directors in all 50 states, and all of them have their own ideas. He was bringing that up to clarify his point, adding that won't kill his video in the long run.
I'm sorry. It's just that all 3 degrees repeated the same information back to back, and not once did one of them think it maybe get redundant. That is just hilarious. Why stop here? We can make a chain off of this right now. The United States is—
that means it's time.
Come on, YouTube Dude. We all know that the United States is a massive country with over 300 billion people as of 2023. So shouldn't that clue you in as how there's a good share of both good and bad animators all throughout the country? I think that's what all the previous degrees were trying to go for with this chain.
Brazil, officially called the Federative Republic of Brazil, is the #1 largest country ever. South America cowers in the presence of Brazil's magnum amount of good cartoons. There are no bad cartoons. The United States wishes it was like Brazil. It has the most animators and the best. Brazil #1 every year. So, anyway, I do actually have something to say here. A light critique of the execution of this joke. Honestly, it's just really low effort. The joke text in the background because you apparently couldn't be bothered to actually make it sound like a bit. The fact that the punchline is nothing but just continuing the chain. Nothing subversive like what YouTube Dude did with the cutoff. Nothing to play off of his interjection. Maybe they call this a difference of humor. I don't know. All of this just makes it come off as lazy.
Wait, who is Mike spamming Party Rock? What?
Really probably the terrible word.
Feels like a bunch of stoners crayon together a bunch of pictures, then paid $10 to some teenager to splice it together in a video editor.
And now, Strider truly enters this fuckfest. You see, this is my thing with a lot of animation critics. I have animated before, I know the process of making an animation, but a lot of animation critics don't. So what happens is, rather than elaborating on their points properly, they rely on similes. Oh, this is like if my 5-year-old daughter took a shit on my paperwork! Newsflash, this does not help cartoonists. Like, at all. In fact, I'm pretty sure a lot of cartoonists fucking hate it when people do this, because they know a lot of these critics don't know what's behind an animation, such as outlining, coloring, art cleanup, positioning, balancing, focus, angling, animation cleanup, design, style, syncing, editing, exporting, finalizing, and other stuff that's complicated as fuck. I could go all day just explaining the animation process, and you know what? It's not like you can't learn about it if you're not an animator. I'm pretty sure you can simply look up a Wikipedia article about animation or something on Google for you to educate yourself. This way, you'll be able to give out advice that animators can bounce off of and maybe even inform your audience. Just saying.
Yeah. No. YouTube dude, you don't need experience in animation to be able to criticize animation. Just because I don't have a degree in cooking doesn't mean I'm not well aware that burnt toast and uncooked steak are unhealthy to eat. Yeah, Strider could have done more research on animation to better give pointers to any would-be animators, I'll give you that. But even with the process you described, that doesn't mean the end result can't still turn out sloppy. Point is, you're taking his analogy a lot more seriously than is warranted. Cut it out.
Larvesta, oh my god. I am actually tired of you conceding to what the actual point is and then somehow throwing out the window so you can proceed to interpret it incorrectly as if that debunks anything. I have no idea how that even happens. Listen, the point is not about how you need animation experience specifically to critique animation. Nowhere did he imply that the process of animation itself automatically means it can't turn out bad. I don't know where the actual fuck he got that from. This isn't even a case of YouTube dude taking a joke too seriously, because at the time this was legitimately a talking point for cartoon channels. Phantom Strider specifically was the biggest example for this. They didn't do this only as a joke. Oftentimes it would be a replacement for any actual critique, or even both at the same time, which is possible by the way. Small pet peeve, but I really hate how people still don't understand that jokes can still contain arguments and critiques behind them. The argument that you just brushed off is that having knowledge and respect for animators in the process will help critics be able to make proper critiques. This amount of reaching for a point is so goofy, I'm starting to get the impression that I just booked a ticket to Glegoland without even realizing.
Enderman?
What?
Nibiru, the primal being.
Brainless. Is there possibly a more brainless cartoon in existence? This cartoon is just a hyperactive splooge of screaming ducks and loud colours. Out of all the American cartoons I can think of, hell, all the cartoons, I couldn't think of a cartoon that just annoyed me more.
Then why is it only at number 4? If you're saying that it's the most annoying cartoon you've ever seen, and the most brainless, I should say, then why is it only at number 4? It's pretty obvious you have an immense hatred for the show, considering you've put it on at least 3 other lists. So I think you should either stop talking about it, or at least talking about it as much, or decide on just how much you hate it. Because right now, it only sounds like you're putting it on this list to please the immense hatred that the cartoon community has for breadwinners, which is the main problem I have with his channel overall. Pretty much all of his videos just appeal to those raging cartoon nerds who hate on cartoons every day and hate on the same cartoons every day. That's pretty much all his channel appeals to. Hence why his videos are so clickbaity, and hence why most of them are top 10 worst, or sometimes top 10 best.
A bit of a spoiler warning here, but this complaint is pointless, and let me tell you why. I decided to check out Strider's top 10 worst cartoons, and at number 8 was Breadwinners, followed by Mr. Pickles, and later on in the countdown, we'd see Family Guy, followed by Ren Seeks Help. The choices for this list are Breadwinners for number 4, Mr. Pickles for number 3, Family Guy for number 2, and Ren Seeks Help for number 1. What's that? Consistency? Actually, no. You wanna know what you could have pointed out, Kablam? You could have pointed out how Mega Babies followed Mr. Pickles in the top 10 worst cartoons list, yet in this list, Mega Babies is lower than Mr. Pickles. But no, I'm Kablam Bandicoot 64, and I shall make the brilliant analytical point of, you keep constantly talking about this in your countdown, so it should be number 1. Newsflash, Kablam, that's not how countdowns work.
You're really unlikable. YouTube dude, given that the videos in question are 11 months apart, did it not cross your mind that Strider may have disliked Mega Babies less by the time of his worst American cartoons list? Your overall point isn't even invalid. Kablam whining about inconsistency where there isn't any is indeed dumb, but being pretentious about it really doesn't help matters on your end.
I don't necessarily disagree with this. My problem here is the amount of tone policing. I can understand not liking someone putting on an angry or hostile persona for their videos. Making it out to be an issue like this, though, is just dumb. Like, you don't even use the word pretentious right either, which seems to be a recurring issue with you too, if you remember the wrong use of arbitrary earlier. The most you could say is that YouTube dude is being a little too harsh and talking down to Kablam, but even then, that doesn't make anything he's saying invalid. He wasn't even being as hostile towards KB compared to how he was towards Snake. Oh, and one more thing. I said this in my Cell commentary, and I'll say it again. Stop using the word but in argumentative situations. It comes off as sloppy and dismissive. It shows up in like half of your interjections, and it makes them worse every single time.
I am a goner.
For now. Just because I'm so frustrated with the other 3. Fat Kid Douglas, your video is exactly what I was talking about when I said in my co-op with Doodle how much nothing soul hypocrisy usually adds to the discussion. I mean, if you want to say Kablam should practice what he preaches, fine. If you want to even make a one-off pot shot at Kablam with these hypocrisy memes, fine. Hypocrisy itself doesn't add much argument-wise, but it makes for a good pot shot. I should know, Ponder and I made a pot shot based off hypocrisy in a co-op we did, but if your entire commentary is full of nothing but you saying, hey, you're making this point? Well, you're no better, LOLXD! Then all your commentary amounts to is nothing but fluff, whether you like it or not. I'm hoping you don't, in which case, fix it.
That's all for Douglas then? Yeah, he did make a lot of points that basically amount to no you complaints, but you did point out other things wrong with him besides that. His point regarding how the United States was large and had a lot of good and bad cartoons, for example. I mean, if that's the main thing you wanted to get onto Douglas for in your final thoughts, that's fine, I guess. But let's not pretend that was the only problem with his video.
You know, I'm more of a tits man than an ass man, but you do you, I guess. Who made you the arbiter of how someone should go about their final thoughts? Because, essentially, your complaint against it is just that, you should have summarized all your points. Which is, not a critique in any way, shape, or form. Final thoughts don't necessarily have to be a complete summary of everything the person already said. It can also be a way to provide additional points that couldn't fit in the rest of the video, or a way to just say what one's overall statement is on a person's video. You know, like a final thought. Also, the United States thing was him getting onto the whole degree chain, not just Douglas. So that was just not even a relevant example even.
Finally, kablam. Like I said, there was going to be a tryout with me, Reaper, and Mav on your video. However, I never got around to it. Regardless, there is something I really want to bring to your attention here, because this has been bugging me about you for a while now. I'll start with the positives, and since I haven't commentated on you since May, here's what you've improved on since then. I can hear you clearly now. You have points. They're not good points, but the points are there. You're actually doing a commentary and not some reaction video on a kid raging at Chuck E. Cheese's. That's it.
Aren't arbitrary and meaningless pauses just fun?
I'm going to take a dump on stream! Okay, mister, I love making commentaries entirely out of memory foam. Let me spell it out for you. The pauses are for dramatic effect, to show that YouTube dude is struggling to find positives with kablam. Thank you, good night, moving on.
Honestly, other than that, you still make awful, unentertaining commentaries that fail to provide any substantial intellectual thought, and you still refuse to listen to your critics.
Okay, hold up, wait a second. Larvesta, is the only reason you implied that YouTube dude's final thoughts contradict this point about kablam not having the Mr. Enter Hater label is because of this single sentence? Because that's baffling at best and downright a bad faith interpretation at worst. By the way, if it's based on his whole thoughts about kablam, that's still not contradictory and will be explained later. Either way, it's a bad interpretation.
Now, with that, you may question why I still give a shit. Well, right at the beginning of this video, the part that Douglas didn't play, you were talking about how you got flack from satirical videos you made about being the commentary community president and how you deleted them because of the flack.
The reason I deleted these commentary community president videos is because they were not well received and not in the way I was intending.
YouTube dude, you could just, edit Kablam's video to add audio balancing to it. You don't need to leave our poor discriminated left ears out.
This point is almost okay, until you think about it for more than like 5 seconds. I can see why UTD refrained from audio balancing this clip, because he wanted to make a jab at Kablam for one, and as an additional point against him that he doesn't have to say out loud because it wouldn't flow with the rest of what he's talking about. At that point, you could argue whether it was necessary, or whether you could have inserted that point somewhere else, but you just didn't. You just complain that there's no audio balancing and then move on. Like, please Larvesta, give me something, anything. Also, this is why I was harping on you for your font choice, because this is a prime example of how it does not scale well, to a detrimental degree. I pray for people who watch your videos on a phone. Yep, I finally have a post-point existence now. Okay, so this is just a funny thing I noticed. Larvesta gets on to YouTube dude for bad audio balancing, but Larvesta's video has bad audio balancing too, and I only noticed this while editing. There are several points where you can see, like, everything is way louder than it should be, and also Larvesta is way louder than the source video, and it's hilarious. This whole thing is just so funny.
I knew that some people wouldn't like them, but the point of them was to be satirical, like sort of parodies, particularly of Donald Trump, but more so just the 2016 election in general, especially on Trump's side of things.
Now, I think it's kind of sad that people misunderstood Kablam's videos, but I also didn't think it was necessary for Kablam to delete them. He could have just explained that the videos weren't meant to be taken seriously and keep them up. Then I realized something. Kablam always deletes his stuff when he gets under too much flack. His rant on the PC Master Race being gaming racism disappearing, his video addressing Doodle and Macboy when they critiqued him disappearing, and even his attempt to quit commentaries and delete all of his commentaries to start food reviews, only to come back 2 weeks later reflect this. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, yeah. There's a reason it's happening 99% of the time, Kablam. It's because your content keeps being stained by the same problems over and over and over again. Now I'm not talking about just your commentaries, I'm talking about your retarded rants and your pathetic excuses for food reviews.
And? Anything about his countdowns? No? Well, now your earlier point about Snake's ad hominem interjection just got a whole lot more groundless. Whoops.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has to be hands down the worst interjection in this whole video, which is funny because it's probably the second or third shortest in length. This genuinely left me speechless when I first heard it, for so many reasons. Alright, here we go, huge tirade incoming. So, not only did you pretty much not address anything that YouTube Dude had said, which is fucking incredible because there were actually things you could have got onto him for, additionally it also made this portion really dragged out for no good reason. His unsympathetic attitude towards Kablam is one thing, and getting onto him for his personal decision of deleting his videos, which isn't the same as just an angry persona like earlier, because YouTube Dude doesn't give Kablam any benefit of the doubt. Now, I don't know the full context to these situations. The point I'm making here though is just that YouTube Dude is going so in on Kablam for what amounts to not being able to handle criticism. Not even in that much of a destructive way either, albeit it's destructive to himself and his own channel, but it's not destructive towards others. Which is still bad, obviously, simply based on what I'm seeing here though, it's a lot less than what others in the community have done in response to criticism, which makes his hostility, at the very least, too hyperbolic in this context. There's also the questionable point of getting on Kablam's case for returning to commentaries after quitting them. Larvesta, you made a point similar in concept to this earlier, and it applies to this too. Kablam could have just changed his mind, simple as that. And even if that is smaller in the grand scheme of things, there's still this one little thing. Larvesta, you were really keen on pointing out how Snake and YouTube Dude were both acting out of line. Specifically with Snake throwing out slurs not once but twice if you include the tweet that, now that I think about it, you probably didn't even read. So where's that energy now when it comes to YouTube Dude saying the R slur? Nah guys, the countdowns though, the countdowns are essential. And now, we get to what Larvesta does say in this interjection. Since I skipped that whole portion earlier because it's much more important right now, I'll let it play out for you.
If countdowns didn't have an audience, if people didn't care about this, they wouldn't watch them and people wouldn't make them. And to criticize Phantom Strider for making countdowns is incredibly hypocritical coming from the likes of you. This is coming from the same guy who made a top 10 list on his favorite albums from his favorite band, They Might Be Giants. Do you even know self-awareness, Kablam? Do you really? Because I honestly can't believe anybody could be this stupid.
Yes, because an ad hominem that doesn't even work as hypocrisy, given how Phantom Strider is famous for making countdowns and Kablam isn't, totally proves his point wrong, am I right? Do you enjoy being a fuckwit?
Please, shut up. You have no idea what you're talking about. Even if Kablam wasn't famous for making countdowns, he still could have made countdowns. But hey, broken logic totally proves someone wrong, right? This better not become a chain.
No, YouTube Dude, Snake does know what they're talking about with their plagiarized points. As I checked, people will remember Kablam for his commentaries on Mr. Enter over any countdowns he could have made. Even if he did make countdowns, your lack of examples makes it hard to verify such, especially given what you're going to bring up in your final thoughts.
This is where it gets ridiculous, folks. The other reason why I skipped over that part of Larvesta's video is because he misses the point entirely, adds nothing to the discussion, and can't fucking read. These are all things I already pointed out or was going to point out in a more substantial way. I know this is getting really long-winded, but I'm just trying to drive home how bafflingly awful this is. The thing that Larvesta thought proved his point is just that YouTube Dude doesn't talk about Kablam's possible countdowns. In-fucking-credible.
You still have poor production values, you're still terribly unentertaining, you still repeat yourself, you still drag on shit to no end, etc, etc. Problems may vary on what type of videos you make, like making a food review off of fucking toothpaste, but other than that, all your content is equally terrible. Here's my advice. If you want to stop getting backlash on stuff like your PC Master Race rants and your commentaries, start taking criticism that'll help you. Otherwise, you might as well just get ahead of the game and delete your channel, because your reception ain't gonna get any better if you don't start taking criticism that'll help you. I'm done.
Wait for it.
You forgot about Snake.
God damn it. Doodle! Seriously? I was trying to skip over him!
Well, being the official hit woman of Sock, I was obligated to tell you. Now, if you excuse me, I have 200 more commentaries to make. Whee!
Fucking weeaboo. Snake, it's pretty obvious at this point that I thought you were the most egregious one in this entire thing. And the funny thing is, it's not even because I hate you the most. Your commentaries are just that terrible.
Would you look at that? A poisoned well! This'll be fun!
So, by now you should have noticed the problem that's been building up in this video. Larvesta does not know where to cut in or what specifically to cut out. I have a pretty good guess as to why this is, and I'll get to that in my final thoughts, but it is especially infuriating here because he just leaves in the rest of UTD's ranting about Kablam, even though he has nothing to say about it. I mean, he just completely ignores UTD giving Kablam an ultimatum of delete your channel or take criticism, but I'm sure you guys get the point by now. Also, not at all what poisoning the well means. Like, literally the complete opposite of what it means. Poisoning the well is something someone does preemptively at the beginning of a presentation.
As I stated in the intro, this was a video that I actually enjoyed in the first few months since its release. Looking back at it several years later, however, has told me that this video has aged about as well as the first game in the Street Fighter series. I didn't even disagree with a good half of the points in YouTube Dude's original video, and compared to his comment chat commentary he brought up, this is an improvement argumentatively at the very least.
Wow, who could have guessed that you agreed with most of his points, considering the countless times you found around saying, oh well, you aren't wrong, but, and skipped over like half of UTD's video.
Despite that though, YouTube Dude's furious and destructive attitude from that video did still show itself here, with him taking opportunities to stoop to Snake's level by arbitrarily and needlessly bashing them, as well as finding issues where there really weren't any to be had.
Oh, well, wouldn't you know a lot about finding problems where there are none, huh, Larvesta? You know, for someone who is clamoring for every bit of context and examples throughout this entire video, you don't refer to anything that would show UTD on the same level as Snake, and not many examples of that in this video, not counting the R-slur you completely missed somehow. Can you tell I'm getting tired? You know what? I'm gonna cut him off here. The rest of his final thoughts aren't much to write home about. Although I do find issue with his kind of word salady comment about how YouTube Dude, I guess, shouldn't do videos on people he hates, in which he ends up bringing his own videos on people he doesn't dislike, but implying it's different because the level of dislike isn't that much. I don't know, it's just a stretch, especially since there's nothing much that showed that YouTube Dude didn't know how to do videos on people he didn't like beyond just having an angry persona. So we're going to be moving on to my final thoughts, and oh boy do I have a lot more to say. So I'm gonna do my usual numbered format summary, but with an extra additional section for things I want to talk about that I couldn't really fit into the rest of my commentary. Here is a small bit of production nitpicks because they actively hindered my watching experience, so I feel like they're important. To everyone watching, including Larvesta, this is another thing of take it or leave it if you want to. Starting small here, the degree markers overlap the previous video's degree markers and it looks lazy and distracting. This is why I made entirely separate assets for my degrees to make sure that they cover up the other numbers. Honestly, you only needed a degree marker for yourself since YouTube Dude already had ones for all the other degrees. There's also the repetitive skip cards, the repetitive avatars, and the lack of any polish in general, i.e. drop shadows on literally any image or text, although those are more pet peeves than anything. Oh, wait, I almost forgot. Your thumbnail! It's something. It is certainly an image. Without harping on it too much, the backgrounds are fine. However, Larvesta's avatar is way too small and in the corner, and the text is also way too small and pushed off into the corners. Larvesta, here's something I actually want you to try next time you make a thumbnail. In whatever program you're using, zoom out as far as you can until the image looks like the average thumbnail size on YouTube. That way you can see how well the elements in it scale and how readable it is. Anyways, the big elephant in the room that I noted earlier is the cuts and where interjections are placed. Larvesta never speeds up the video when it actually would help with things not feeling dragged out, and it just also ends up padding out the video because he apparently doesn't know what things are worth cutting, along with the extremely short interjections coming off of very long bits of source video. I think most of this problem just comes from Larvesta either not having much to say in the first place or not knowing where to put his thoughts. It gets very draining very quickly. Speaking of not having much to say, so much of this video was borderline pointless. Considering how much of it boils down to repeating what previous degrees say and pretending like that debunks or adds anything, it is downright laughable how much Larvesta cuts in just to have the point being discussed fly right over his head, right into the Pentagon. There was also the multiple accounts of you using words completely wrong, or just having moments where your wording makes your point pretty incomprehensible. Don't even get me started, again, on the amount of times you insert the word but into your arguments. The whole premise of this commentary, being retrospective, is executed in the worst way possible. There are a couple very notable parts that make it obvious he refused to look at this video from the context that it came out in, at least to an extent, if you remember an earlier part in this video where you say that Kablam faded from memory, which I can only assume was mentioned because you thought that somehow supported Douglas's argument. You not being able to add anything new to discussion makes this even worse. And finally, we get to the worst problem that plagues this commentary. Your complete inability to either pay attention, analyze statements, or just look at what's on screen in front of you. I'm genuinely trying not to be rude and make it clear that any of the potshots I made in this video weren't to be taken seriously, because I don't want to be sarcastic aggressive commentator number a billion. But it is really hard when I'm watching someone actively refuse to use critical thinking, and grasp at straws to make arguments that dodge the original point at best. An example of this lack of being able to use critical thinking that was present in a portion that I skipped for the sake of time was you saying that plagiarism, that was easily deduced from the fact that it was a consistent issue with Snake, actually wasn't plagiarism because the rest of the point was different, as if that made it any better. And that transitions nicely into my last point, the constant calls for context or examples that either were directly given to you or are completely unnecessary to the discussion. It's just annoying and never actually debunked or changed anything. All of this combined makes this look like a first draft that was rushed. And before you say anything, I'm not saying that it is rushed or that it is a first draft because I wouldn't know that. I'm saying that the sloppy way this was presented made it come off that way. Larvesta, the best advice I have for you is to polish your videos a bit more if you're able to and actually write down the arguments you're addressing so that you can properly think over them. I mean, hey, I wrote an entire transcript of all the relevant portions of this video so I could do subtitles for my own video, and it was extremely helpful in terms of being able to analyze what people are saying without having to rewatch a clip over and over again. By the way, funnily enough, Douglas was the easiest one to write the transcript for because he was the only one who felt the need to actually put breaks between his sentences. Say what you will about him, but I'd say that's a plus. So that's that on that. Hopefully everyone who was a part of this clusterfuck of a degree train is doing well. And to Larvesta, good luck with your future videos. Thank you all for watching and I'll see you in the stars.